Estate sales are a great place where you can go to find antiques, projects, and other useful and unique items. The sad reality, though, is that the reason for the sale in the first place is probably because a loved one passed away and the family's trying to get rid of things as quickly as possible. But another reason that I like to go to these is because it's like going to a museum for a person. It's a glimpse into their life, their accomplishments, their achievements, their interests. Like this dresser valet that I picked up for $2. I appreciate how useful this was to the owner. He probably stored his keys and his wallet in it after a hard day's work. I feel a sense of satisfaction by reviving it and keeping it around for another generation. But first, it's going to need a total restoration. No matter what restoration or refinishing project I'm working on, it's almost always better to disassemble it completely. Obviously, this isn't possible for some projects. However, if the joints come apart easily, try to take it apart carefully. It's much easier to sand the pieces when your project isn't together. I'm starting out with 120 grit sandpaper, then I'll use 220, and for the final sanding on all the pieces, I'm going to use a very fine grit like 320. I'll use an orbital sander to remove as much of the old finish as quickly as possible, but for the final sanding, I want to do it by hand with the 220 and 320. By hand, I can sand in the direction of the grain. The orbital sander has a tendency to leave small circles, and they don't show up until you finish the piece. Here I've got what looks like a split in the top grain of the plywood lid. I'm filling it with a wood filler. Hopefully this won't show up in the staining process. If it does, I'll have to figure something out. Here's a little trick I figured out. How do you know when you're done sanding? Often I think I'm done, but then I miss some spots and I can't see them until I start staining the wood. It's always better to catch the scratches before you stain the wood. So I'm going to soak a rag in mineral spirits or paint thinner. I apply it to the wood. This will reveal the minor scratches. Let the thinner evaporate, then sand again. After about 3 hours of laborious and tedious work, all the pieces are disassembled and sanded. 120, 220, and 320 grit, in that order. Now you can't really see it here because the nails and screws are so small, but soaking it in vinegar for 24 hours got rid of the rust and the brush just cleans it up. With all the pieces now sanded and ready for finishing, I'm going to first apply a stain, and then I'm going to use a technique called French polish to give this thing a high gloss finish. First thing we're going to do is stain. So I've got this light stain, which I really didn't like, and I've got this dark stain. I didn't care for this either. So I mixed these about 50-50, and I came up with a pretty nice looking finish. I'm not going to glue all this together and then stain and finish. I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. I'm going to stain it and finish it separately. And the reason for that is for the French polishing technique. So I'm going to mask off the joints and then I'm going to finish it with the French polish. There's two things you need to do in preparation for French polishing. The first, you've got to prepare the wood. The way that I do that is to take a coat of shellac, brush it on, let it dry for about an hour, take some fine sandpaper, sand it, then wipe it all off. Now the wood is ready. That's all you need to do to prep the wood. Now there's other methods that people use to fill the grain, but I find that's the simplest and it works for me. So the second thing you're going to want to do in order to prepare for French polishing is to create yourself a polishing pad. Now you can use an old cotton t-shirt and cut yourself 2 squares of it about 8 inches. The first one you're going to wad up and leave it flat on the front. Take some shellac and soak it pretty good. Take your second cloth, wrap it on the outside, and then take a rubber band and we're going to tie it around the back. This is all you need for your pad. Now we can start to French polish. So with our pad ready, we can begin French polishing. I'll usually add a little bit more of the shellac, and then I'll take a few drops of denatured alcohol, and then 1 drop of mineral oil. I'll just put that on my finger and wipe it on. Now we're ready to begin. So in figure 8s and in circular motions, I'll just mix it up. I start applying it. Now, you're going to start seeing a bit of a shine, and after about 3 to 5 minutes, you're going to be amazed. This is going to actually start to look pretty well finished, but it's not. You're going to want to do this over and over because what happens is the shellac builds up and it'll take quite a long time to get a nice layer. Now if you're satisfied, you can quit after 5 minutes, but if you really want that glass beautiful finish, you might have to work this piece for about a half an hour. So after I work it with the figure 8s and the circular motions, I'll always end up by going back and forth. It's like a plane landing and taking off. You don't want to leave it stick to the wood, otherwise it's going to leave a mark. So you just repeat the process. You add more shellac, a little denatured alcohol, a drop of oil. You do the whole thing over again. So there you have it, a beautifully restored men's dresser Valet. For a little project, it sure took a long time. There's a lot to it. The French polishing, the relining of the drawer, all the detail work. It almost looks too good to use. Look at the beautiful grain instead of the obscured dark wood. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching Alley Picked. Until next time, I'll meet you in the alley.